Coming up on this Monday edition of Newsline at noon. China's demarcation of an air defense identification zone over the East China Sea raises tensions in the region. Part of the newly established zone overlaps with Korea's own defense area. World powers reach an agreement with Iran to curb Tehran's nuclear program in exchange for a gradual easing of economic sanctions. Israel denounces the agreement as a historic mistake. Plus, the National Assembly is set to begin reviewing next year's budget this week, but frosty relations between the ruling and opposition parties, aggravated by a Catholic priest savaging of President Park Geun-hye's leadership, have cast a shadow over the domestic political scene. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
Where's the best place for bibimbap?
Les Jeux Olympiques d'hiver se dérouleront-ils à Pyeongchang?
هل أنتم حقاً سابع أكبر مصدر في العالم؟
この歌手は誰ですか？你好，最近哪部电视剧的人气最旺？
Korea is attracting interest from around the world. The more you know, the more you want to know. Dynamic Korea.
Thanks for tuning in. This is Newsline at noon, and I'm Kim Hyun-ji in Seoul.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. China's establishment of a new air defense identification zone in the East China Sea has set off alarm bells in the region. The zone, which came into effect on Saturday, covers islands that are also claimed by Japan.
Right. It also overlaps with Korea's own defense zone. Our Connie Lee starts us off.
China's demarcation of a new air defense zone is raising concerns in Seoul as it partly overlaps with Korea's own air defense identification zone, or the KADIZ.
It is regretful that the air defense zone declared by the Chinese government partly overlaps with our Korean air defense identification zone in the area west of Jeju Island.
The new zone also covers the Korean island Iado. Iado, a submerged rock that lies between China and Korea, is claimed by Korea even though it is not included in Korea's air defense zone. The Korean government says it will be in talks with China to make sure the zone does not affect Korea's national interest. The Korean government's statement on Sunday came a day after China declared the air identification zone in the East China Sea. It's Beijing's latest step to assert tighter Chinese control over some disputed islands known as Diaoyu in China and Senkaku in Japan. The islands now lie inside China's new air defense zone. China's government says it will take defensive emergency measures against any aircraft that does not identify itself properly in that area. This means aircraft flying in the zone without authorization could be intercepted by fighter jets. The U.S. says China's action is an attempt to change the status quo in the Pacific, while Japan called the move unacceptable and said it raises the potential for unfortunate incidents. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Korea's rival parties are locked in a fresh war of words over a series of highly controversial remarks made late last week by a group of Catholic priests. The latest development comes at a bad time as Parliament still has to settle last year's and next year's budget. Our Kim Young-gil has the details.
The National Assembly has a bumpy road ahead over the audit of the 2012 budget and setting government spending for next year. Rival parties agreed to undertake discussions from Tuesday on the budget for 2014, and the Budget Settlement Committee wants to pass last year's budget settlement at Thursday's plenary session. But last Friday's controversial mess has thrown a spanner in the works. The leftist Catholic Priests Association for Justice made a series of contentious remarks about President Park Geun-hye and North Korea's 2010 shelling of South Korea's Yeonpyeong Island. Priest Park Chang-shin said President Park should resign and her predecessor Lee Myung-bak should be arrested to take responsibility for the National Intelligence Service's alleged meddling in last year's presidential election. In regard to Yeonpyeong Island, the priest said North Korea had only taken countermeasures when it launched the attack, blaming a South Korea-US military exercise that was taking place in the West Sea at the time. Father Park argued South Korea would react if Japan carried out military exercises near the Korea-controlled Dokdo Islets in the East Sea. On Sunday, the Defense Ministry condemned the priest's remarks on Yeonpyeong, saying the comments were irrational and insulted the bereaved families. The presidential office and the ruling Saenuri Party also conveyed their disapproval, saying religious leaders should abstain from making comments that divide the country. The main opposition Democratic Party sided with the priest to some extent, saying President Park and the Saenuri Party needed to listen to what the message conveyed. However, DP floor leader Jeon Byung-hun distanced himself from the remarks about Yeonpyeong Island. During a mass on Sunday, the Archbishop of Seoul said priests should refrain from intervening in politics, as it should be up to believers to decide on what is right and wrong. Kim Hyung-gil, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye has made it clear that she and her government will neither allow nor overlook any behavior that cause chaos and conflict in the country. The president's comments were aimed at recent remarks made by priests from a leftist Catholic group that seemingly justified North Korea's shelling of Yeonpyeong Island and a torpedo attack on a South Korean warship. During a meeting with her senior aides Monday, President Park said such behavior and remarks make the sacrifice of the nation's fallen soldiers in vain. The president also stressed her administration will immediately and firmly retaliate against any sudden provocation by the North, so Pyongyang will never think of carrying out such an act again. Rival party leaders have agreed to meet this Monday afternoon to resolve the political impasse that has deadlocked parliamentary business for weeks. The meeting was proposed by main opposition Democratic Party leader Kim Han-gil, who is expected to demand an independent council investigation into allegations that the nation's spy agency and other state bodies meddled in last year's presidential election. Ruling Saenuri Party leader Hwang Woo-yeol reportedly accepted the proposal in part to meet the deadline for setting next year's budget. In accepting the proposal, he affirmed that the ruling party's stance that a special committee should be set up to reform the nation's spy agency, which is another DP's demand, but that an independent council investigation is not necessary.
In economic news, Korea's per capita income is expected to top $24,000 for the first time this year. But economists say nearly half of this year's income gain comes from the Korean won's advance against the dollar. Song Ji-son reports.
With the government forecasting an economic growth of 2.8% for this year, Korea is expected to post the highest ever gross national income per capita of well over $24,000 this year. But the rise from well below $23,000 in 2012 is inflated by the strength of the Korean currency. Lee Geun-tae, economist at LG Economic Research Institute, said given that the Korean won has gained 2.9% of its value against the dollar in the first half of this year, the exchange rate change is expected to account for nearly half of this year's income gain. Korea's GNI per capita first surpassed $20,000 mark in 2007 and has hovered below $23,000 in the past 5 years. But many economists believe the country will have to wait several more years before its per capita income hits $30,000 mark. The Korea Institute of Finance reported Monday aging society and low birth rate as factors that could slow economic growth, as those trends would reduce household income and investment, thereby dragging down potential growth rate. It said household income will decrease by 0.6 percentage points every time the country's GDP growth rate slows down by 1 percentage point. The OECD expects the Korean economy to grow 2.7% this year and 3.8% next year, after expanding 2% last year. Song Ji-son, Arirang News.
The Korean government has vowed to boost the number of female workers by fostering the creation of more part-time jobs. Finance Minister Hyun Oh-seok said Sunday that part-time jobs allow women to strike the right balance between family and work. Hyun added working conditions for part-time workers, including their hourly wage and social insurance, should be set at the same level as full-time workers. In line with its push to raise the nation's employment rate to 70%, the government had already laid out plans to hire 600 part-time teachers for public schools from the second half of next year.
For your fill of Korean and international news. Join Chae Yu-sun and Mark Broom every weekday at lunchtime. Newsline at noon.
Plenary session this Wednesday and vote on the government restructuring bills. Iran and world powers struck a historic agreement over the weekend that seeks to curb Tehran's nuclear capacity. The deal will keep Iran's nuclear program in check for 6 months, but the hardest work still lies ahead. Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
After 4 days of torturous negotiations, a nuclear deal was finally struck Sunday between Iran and 6 world powers. The landmark deal is expected to thaw frosty relations between Iran and the West, as well as benefit peace and stability in the Middle East.
It is a good deal for the Middle East and for the world. It's a very important opportunity for the future.
Over the next 6 months, Iran will suspend some of its nuclear activities in return for partial sanctions relief. But U.S. officials say the difficult part starts now, as they see the initial agreement as a mere holding action for a more comprehensive agreement. Analysts say the complexities involved in negotiating a firmer, long-term agreement are far greater, and that both sides will have to make tougher choices down the line. While Western governments will see concessions that Iran has strongly opposed, including removing several of its key nuclear facilities, Iran is expected to demand a suspension of sanctions against its oil and banking industries. Lifting the sanctions would ultimately require approval from U.S. Congress. Confronting such a myriad of difficult questions and tough decisions, negotiators say the interim accord may need to be extended. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Staying with the Iran nuclear deal, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry told U.S. news network CNN Sunday that Iran is not North Korea, a country that agrees to stop its nuclear development to get sanctions removed and then secretly continues on with its program. Kerry cited Iran's commitment to have daily inspections of certain facilities and its status as a member of state of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Some Republicans in Israel, however, call the nuclear agreement very dangerous, saying Tehran would be able to keep the key elements of its nuclear weapons-making capability. Reports claim secret high-level talks between the United States and Iran laid much of the groundwork for the agreement.
The nuclear deal with Iran has raised hopes in certain circles of a similar deal with North Korea. But as our Kim Ji-yeon reports, the differences between the two cases may prove too great to make that a reality.
The landmark nuclear deal with Iran on Sunday has raised hopes for a nuclear agreement with North Korea. Although some think the deal could set a precedent for a deal with the North, local experts here in South Korea are skeptical. They say that Iran and North Korea are fundamentally different, which affects the amount and degree of control the international community has in each case. North Korea sees its nuclear program as a deterrent against external threats, and so most experts think it is very unlikely that Pyongyang will be willing to relinquish its nuclear program. It is and claims to be a nuclear state, and so there's very little room for the kind of exchange that could lead to a deal. Pyongyang dropped out of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1993, and then the country went ahead with 3 nuclear weapons tests. Iran, on the other hand, is party to the NPT and claims its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes only. In addition, the international community does have something valuable to offer Iran in exchange for Iran's suspension of some of its nuclear activities, the lifting of certain economic sanctions. President Hassan Rouhani's focus on the country's economic development also played an important role in Sunday's nuclear agreement. Experts also say Germany's role as mediator was an important factor in the nuclear deal. China has served as a mediator in the case of North Korea, but it is unlikely that China will be able to do for the North what Germany did for Iran, since China and the U.S. and its allies have different conditions for negotiations and a deal with North Korea. While China and the U.S. and its allies agree that six-nation talks on the denuclearization of North Korea should resume, the U.S. and its allies, including South Korea and Japan, want North Korea to take concrete steps toward denuclearization before the talks can resume, while China believes the talks can happen in tandem with denuclearization. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
World Bank President Kim says his organization will make preparations to promptly provide assistance to North Korea in case there is a political breakthrough and Pyongyang decides to open up. Meeting with reporters in Washington ahead of his visit to Seoul next week, Kim said the World Bank would work closely with South Korean experts on North Korea to collect data on Pyongyang's economic conditions. The World Bank chief said North Korea should learn from the example of Myanmar, once a closed country that is now attracting foreign investment since it decided to open up. South Korea's Air Force has decided to purchase 40 Lockheed Martin F-35A stealth fighters as its next main combat aircraft. The move is expected to change the whole concept of airborne tactical operations in the future. Son Jung-in reports.
In case of emergency, South Korea's Air Force would currently need to use more than 12 of its jets in 3 formations to infiltrate enemy territory without being detected. Moreover, South Korea's current combat aircraft, the Boeing F-15K, needs to be surrounded by electronic warfare aircraft and other stealers to evade the enemy's radar. However, with Lockheed Martin's F-35A stealth jets to be introduced starting in 2018, a whole new Air Force employment strategy will be put in place. The F-35As won't need supporting fighters because of their cutting-edge stealth and electronic warfare capabilities.
Typical weapons that are mounted externally are easily spotted by radar, but with stealth jets like the F-35A, the arms are internal, reducing the chance of radar wave reflection.
In case of a war, South Korea's 40 F-35As could sally at the same time and drop up to 80 shots. The F-35A's 1,000-kilogram air-to-ground guided missile can penetrate a concrete wall and well over 2 meters thick, enabling the Air Force to destroy fortified bases.
The stealth jet will play a critical role in deterring war, as it is designed to secretly infiltrate and launch preemptive strikes.
However, it's presumed the North Korean army has over 8,000 underground fortresses dotted around the country. Some experts say that even with the F-35As, South Korea needs to come up with stronger supplement policies to protect the nation. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
New evidence has emerged that shows the level of brutality Japanese vigilantes and some military personnel used during the massacre of Koreans after the Great Kanto earthquake in 1923. The National Archives of Korea revealed last week the names of Korean victims during Japan's colonial rule of Korea after reviewing dozens of rosters that were discovered earlier this year at the Korean embassy in Tokyo. Records released Sunday included the manner in which Koreans were murdered following the earthquake, with some Korean victims stabbed to death with bamboo spears or murdered with pickaxes. The Kanto earthquake hit Japan in September 1923, devastating Tokyo and Yokohama and killing over 100,000 people. In the chaos following the disaster, false rumors were spread about Koreans mobilized for forced labor in Japan who were suspected of poisoning wells and carrying bombs, which led to the massacre of Korean residents in the disaster area. The frosty relationship between Korea and Japan is causing problems for the Obama administration's foreign policy. This, according to a report Sunday in the New York Times. The U.S. Daily cited a rare meeting of top defense officials of Korea and Japan this month, which ended on bad terms and with no agreements. And President Park Geun-hye recently demanding that U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel force Tokyo to behave. The article went on to say that the chilly Korea-Japan relationship was not helped by the Obama administration's inability to come up with a unified front in dealing with China and North Korea.
Afghan President Hamid Karzai is dragging his feet on endorsing a security deal that would enable U.S. troops to operate in Afghanistan beyond 2014. Hundreds of Afghan elders, known as the Law Jirga, agreed to a deal on Sunday that would allow the U.S. to continue to provide advice and training to Afghan security forces and conduct counter-terrorism operations after the withdrawal of international troops at the end of next year. The elders also asked Karzai to sign it promptly, but the president said he would wait until after a presidential election set for next April. Karzai says he wants assurances Washington will not meddle in the elections. He also said he was waiting for the U.S. to ensure security within Afghanistan and to promise that a U.S. soldier will never again enter the home of an Afghan citizen. Back here in Korea, and plays based on tragic historical events may not sound like light entertainment, but there are a few productions on stage in Seoul right now that could change your mind. Kwon So-ah reports.
The play Garden Balsam tells the story of a young girl who was forced into sexual slavery during Japan's colonial rule of Korea. It is based on Yoon Jung-mo's novel Your Mother Was a Korean Comfort Woman. It follows the girl from her youth through the birth of her son and granddaughter, using a combination of documentary footage and theatrical elements to shed new light on its subject. The actor's use of simple but strong words and expressive gestures helps get the message across.
We created the work thinking about how much we had neglected our own history and how the members of our generation should play a major role in helping to resolve the comfort woman issue.
Thousands of innocent people were locked up, beaten, and abused in Busan, and more than 500 of them were killed over 12 years starting in 1987. The tragic incident was part of a scheme by the Hyungjae Welfare Center to get more financial aid from the government. The story is told in the play Happy Together, which despite its heavy subject matter, manages to keep things light with colorful movement and music. The University of Laughs tells the story of a government censor whose job was to ensure the plays running in the theater district during World War II were patriotic enough. It follows him over 7 days as he gets into a conflict with a young writer who is determined to craft the funniest play ever.
This play makes us think about the true meaning of laughter in our lives, and we try to deliver the message to the audience in the most fun way possible.
With all three plays, audiences have the opportunity to reflect on the past without feeling they are weighed down by history, and they may even help them learn something about themselves. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
And now let's turn to our Lee Ji-hyun for today's forecast. Hello, Ji-hyun.
Well, hello there, guys. Well, how was your morning commute? Did you guys make it to work all right?
Well, my morning commute was pretty good. What about you, Yeonji?
Well, it was not bad, but chilly, pretty chilly.
Very chilly, and there are lots of leaves rustling around the streets, I noticed. So I guess it's time to say goodbye to autumn.
Well, it does look that way, huh? Well, the band of rain we've been receiving from this morning is bringing much cooler weather than what we had over the weekend, especially in the Seoul metro area. Temperatures will remain in the single digits today, and the southern part of the nation will struggle to reach 15 degrees Celsius. And the rain is gradually letting up from the east, but lingering showers are expected in the central and Jeollado until the late afternoon. And please note that rain could change to snow in the mountainous areas of Gangwon-do with strong gusty wind persisting all day long. So please take precautions on facility maintenance. Now, temperature-wise, today should be the warmest day of the week because starting tomorrow, temperatures will plunge to -2 again here in the Seoul area, which is about 8 degrees lower than this this morning. And we're looking at a chance of mixed rain and snow tomorrow afternoon. And temperature will drop every day from today until the end of the week. So get ready to bundle up tight again. With that in mind, here are the readings for this afternoon. Seoul will only get up to 7 degrees Celsius, and Daegu and Gwangju will get up to 12 and 10 respectively, while the high for Busan will be 14. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju will remain warmer at 13, Daejeon will be at 8, while Dokdo will peak at 12, and Mount Keungang will just make it up to 1. Now that's all I have for you today. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and back to Yeonji and Mark in the studio.
Thank you very much for the weather there, Jian. Perhaps today is going to be the last day of autumn, so we should enjoy it before the cold comes. But that wraps up this Monday edition of Newsline at Noon. I've been Mark Broom.
And I'm Kim Yeonji. Don't change that channel yet. We'll have more news coming up in the afternoon.